Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining today. We're going to get started now. Just to quickly note that this webinar is being recorded, and then we can send it out to you guys afterwards. So please just note that. My name is Anna. I'm part of the inquiries team here at the Oxford Professional Education Group. And today is the first webinar in our PR on Demand series that we're running, hosted by Steve, who you can see just here. Steve has managed 3 major PR and marketing consultancies during his career, and he's currently the chief executive of Digital Drums. So if anyone knows what they're talking about, it's Steve. So I'm going to pass over to you now, Steve, so we can get going.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And hello, everybody, and welcome along to this session. I've got roughly an hour to get as much information crammed into you as we can. I am going to have to obviously skate over certain things because digital is such a vast subject that to do it in an hour would be a challenge to anybody of any ilk at all, actually. So I'll be giving you a hurtling tour of what's going on. Just very quickly, and it really is going to be quickly, it's just as a background to me, I'm a fellow of the PRCA, and I've received awards from the Chartered Institute of Marketing. I'm one of the communicators that's been training lots and lots of organizations in digital, from sort of the Prime Minister's office all the way down to freelancers and everything in between. So I've worked with most bodies. I only say that really just to give you the assurance that you're in safe hands, really. I write a regular newspaper column about marketing communications, crisis management, and the digital world as well. And I've been on both sides of our industry. So I've started as a 16-year-old apprentice. So I've worked for British Telecom, where I eventually became head of PR. And then I was head of PR at HSBC and at South African Airways. As you've just heard, I've also run a number of leading PR agencies. I guess the biggest would be Porter Novelli, of which I was director for consumer. And that was the 3rd biggest agency in Europe at the time. But I've been involved in the agency world for the last, I'd say, about 20 years. So my career is kind of equally split between in-house and agency. So whatever your position is in the sector, whether you are just breaking into it, whether you are a seasoned veteran like myself, or whether you're in-house or agency, I'd like to think I've got some empathy with the challenges that you're facing as you go through your everyday campaigns and PR planning and all the various things that we get up to. So what I'm going to talk about today really is we're going to talk essentially about digital audiences. Because you can forget what kind of platforms are coming along. It is always the audience that drives it, and marketing history is littered with great brands and fantastic inventions that just never took off. Not because they weren't great, they didn't take off because the audience, the target audience, the consumer, if you like, just didn't embrace it and didn't get behind it. And that's always going to be our single biggest challenge. Now, we are in an age right now known as digital transformation. In fact, we're kind of coming to at the end of it, really. But we have been going through this transformation for a while. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of facts. You'll know these facts. You will absolutely know them. You might not necessarily have understood or appreciated the scale of it. And what it's designed to do is to tell you that digital is changing every facet of our lives. It's not just in communications. It's not just in marketing. It is absolutely everywhere. And whether you're 7 minutes old or 77 years of age, we're standing on shifting sands that are changing all the time. And as a PR professional, you need to keep your finger on the pulse and make sure that you don't get left behind by these shifting sands. So we're in this age, as I said, of digital transformation. And what does that mean? Well, first of all, and you'll know this, the world's biggest taxi company doesn't actually own a single cab. That is our good friends Uber and their ilk. There are lots of companies like Uber, like Lyft and so on. And what they've done, of course, is revolutionized how we move around urban environments across the globe. And they've done it through digital. Somebody would never have thought of this being capable maybe 20 years ago. So it's changed everything in terms of how we move around in urban environments. Now, as you just heard a moment ago, I was the head of PR at British Telecom. So this next fact kind of staggers me even to this day. That is because the world's biggest telecoms companies don't own a single piece of infrastructure, which is quite incredible. What we're talking about here is the likes of Skype, WhatsApp, and WeChat. And I point to WeChat for one particular reason. WeChat, you may or may not have heard of it, is very, very big in the Far East, particularly in places like China. And what that means for the likes of you and I is that don't look to the West for innovation. Always look to the East. And the reason for that is that the big players that you might think of, such as Meta, which owns Facebook and Instagram, and then you've got people like Google, well, they don't innovate anymore. They're like General Motors and Ford. They buy up innovation. So WhatsApp, for example, was a young Ukrainian engineer who applied for a job at Facebook, didn't get the job, went off and invented WhatsApp and sold it to what's now Meta for something like $18 billion, which at the time was bigger than the national reserves of the Ukraine, which was his home country. So he was actually richer than his home country. So WeChat is a bit like WhatsApp, but it's got a sort of e-commerce element to it. And my very best friend lives in Shenzhen in China. And he's a British expat, but he was telling me that you can't really get by without WeChat in China because everything is geared towards that digital world. So look to the East, not to the West, for innovation. Now, the world's biggest, or rather largest accommodation provider actually doesn't own any property. Yes, it's Airbnb, who have, of course, revolutionized how you and I experience international cities or even domestic cities. Now, if you go to Venice, you want to live like a Venetian, right? So you don't actually want to stay in a big branded corporate hotel. What you want to do is live like a Venetian. And that's where the likes of Airbnb, again, through digital, have been able to transform that part of the sector. So what we're seeing is a massive change. There's about 50 of these. I'm not going to bore you by giving you them all, but let me just tell you that there are some other ones that we need to be aware of as well. Another area that we need to know is that the world's largest movie theatre company, if that's what you could call it, doesn't own a single cinema. That, of course, is Netflix, who've changed the way you and I consume content. Now, it's not unusual for me and you to perhaps consume more than one program or episode at a time. Over a day or two, you can indeed consume an entire box set. Who would have thought of binging on television or movies a couple of years back? But that's what Netflix does. And also through its algorithms, what they do is they start to match your taste to their content. So some people don't like that. I love it. I love the fact I get a text from Netflix saying, we've just uploaded another documentary or film that we know from your pattern of consumption is what you like. And you know what? That's what they do. And they do it very well indeed. And then the world's most valuable retailers, well, they don't actually own any inventory. How cool is that? Because I'm talking about, of course, Amazon, and I'm talking about the likes of Alibaba. Now, Amazon and Alibaba, again, with Alibaba, really important that you understand they are from the Far East. You might not have heard of them. You may have been vaguely aware of them. Very, very big in places like China, Taiwan, Malaysia, Singapore, Sri Lanka. Very, very big indeed. And really, in some parts of the world, giving Amazon a run for their money. But they don't own content. They don't own any stock, if you like, or any inventory. And they have revolutionized how you and I shop online. And then just to bring this to a close, and as I said, there's 50 of these, and it would be fascinating to do that just alone, but I've got too much more to say. But what we bring this full circle by saying that the world's most popular media owner doesn't actually produce any content. Now, that's almost counterintuitive. How can you be the world's most popular media owner and not produce any form of content? Well, of course, I'm talking about our dear friends, Facebook, or rather their parent company, Meta. So what we're seeing here is that digital transformation is impacting every single facet of life. It's not just about communications. It is changing the way you and I are as human beings. So essentially the rationale for today, when I was thinking about what I should do, was I pulled out two quotes that I kind of really have shaped my approach to how I advise my clients. And the first was that the quote by Henry Jenkins: "Our focus, you and I, should not be on emerging technologies. That doesn't really matter. It's emerging cultural practices, how people take on content and what they do with that. That's what you and I should be interested." And things change because of people interacting with other people, not because of technology or design. That really harnesses it, that facilitates it. But lots and lots of brands, lots and lots of innovations have never made the cut through, simply because, well, the public just didn't get it. So what are we looking at in 2022? Because remember, what I'm saying here is, what are the drivers of change for us? Well, there's no doubt about it. The COVID lockdown and the pandemic has changed a lot for you and I. And what we're seeing is that the audience of 2022 and beyond, whether it's B2C, B2B, or as we now call it, B2C at B, business to consumers while they're at business, which reflects the fact that a lot of us now live in a hybrid world where we're actually working from home, or a couple of days in the office and a couple of days at home. That means that I, as a brand, can get to you, a consumer, while technically you're still at business. A few years ago, you went off my radar when you went to work and I couldn't get to you, but that's not the case now. Now, what we're seeing is that people are seeking increasingly inspiration, advice, and reassurance about their products and services, their choices and their purchases, and in a way that we've never seen that before. Now people are seeking inspiration, and that's what they get from the likes of social media. They're looking for advice, and when they look for advice, they go to several different sources. Why? Because you know what? It's all about fake news. We don't trust politicians. Maybe we never did, but we certainly don't trust them now. We don't trust necessarily the mainstream media the way we might have done 20 years ago. We certainly don't trust brands the way we may have done a while back. So now we are seeking advice from several different sources. We're cross-referencing that information, that insights, with opinion formers, opinion leaders, and influencers. And influencers can be really little niche people in terms of very, very influential, but in a niche subject. So we're now going to other trusted sources, and that's where our priority will be from here on inwards for the next 10 years or so. And what you're finding is that people are now seeking and experiencing communications in a sort of halo effect. In what they're really wanting is to get their information from many different sources. They cross-reference that from many different sources. They're buying goods that match their other priorities in life. So sustainability, luxury, well-being, all those things are now influencing how they take on information, where they take it on, who they buy from, and so on. And what you and I have to do is we have to be specialists across a much, much wider set of platforms and maybe communications disciplines than we've ever been before. Because if we're not, then we're going to fall behind, because content is now coming at us from different areas, and we're seeking those different areas to take reference or inspiration, or basically just to make sure things are standing up and that we trust them. So what that's led to is something called the peso model. Now, the peso model is what sits right at the heart of any digital strategy. It's what we do to make our programs run. So basically, and again, you are probably familiar with it. If not, you need to, because this is the way of 2022 going forward. It's been around since 2014. It was first established in a book called Spin Sucks. But now, because of the lockdown and the pandemic, we've seen a gigantic increase in businesses and brands running on this particular field. Now, I'm going to start off with earned, although it's peso, as you can see, but the earned stands for what you and I might be doing right now, which is earned media. And earned media is, without a doubt, of course, things like media relations, but you'll see in there blogger relations, influencer relations, and SEO. SEO is organic. It means that you have to earn the right for Google to rank you accordingly, and that takes a skill. You also have to earn the right for your news release to be put into the media. You have to earn that right. We have to earn the right for bloggers to write about us, or influencers to Snapchat or Instagram us, or whatever it might be. That's what earned media is. And that's what you and I have been doing more or less for most of these years. But it's, again, expanding. But it goes much further than that. We've now got owned media. And owned media has really taken off for PR people in the lockdown, because we've always had customer newsletters and internal newsletters. Of course we have, and we owned that. We controlled the messaging, we controlled the distribution and the timing. But now you've got things like podcasts, webcasts, webinars, all discovered by brands. Even though that podcasting phenomena and Zoom and that have been around since well before 2020, we discovered it big time in lockdowns, and many businesses running their affairs around that. And then you've got the paid media, and more you're going to have to do things like pay-per-click. You're going to have to know about that. Why? Because if you go into Google and put anything in, have a look at the return you get. The first 2, 3, 4 returns are nearly always advertisements. They're paid per click search returns. So you've got to do organic, but organic is always going to get more difficult, and Google have never hid that. Now it's all about paid per click media, and you and I have to know that. We have to know the strategies, because now you're going to bid on words. And of course, the most common words, and love, hashtag love is the most used hashtag for 7 years on the internet. But if you were to bid on the word love, well, it probably cost the national reserves of a small nation to try and secure that. So if you and I have finite budgets, PPC is a bit of a challenge. So we have to learn how to manipulate that. And that's the strategy that can be achieved, and PRs are doing it. These are all the drivers of change that we're seeing. And then finally, we've got the shared. And the shared, so it's paid, earned, shared, and owned. But the shared is, for me, the one that is the most powerful of all the channels of communication, because with all the things I've told you about, people not trusting and people wanting authenticity and people cross-referencing, well, the things are that if you don't believe the media, you don't believe politicians, you don't believe brands and what they say anymore, who do you believe? Well, who you believe is people like you and I. So if I am followed by you on, say, Twitter, and you then see a post that I put on and you retweet it, that goes into your community who respect you. They might not know me, they respect you. You've shared my content, and guess what? Yep, that's third-party endorsement. Now you can see this is a Venn diagram. So the bit where it all interacts, that's the most important bit, because if you do all 4 bits in your campaigns going forward, that gets you the all-important authority. Authority, trust, authenticity. They're the big 3 things that all brands are chasing now. So let's move on and talk about the evolution, because people are now evolving, and we've got this digital citizen thing going on. The first thing I've got to tell you is that all our attention spans are in decline. To be fair, it's been in decline since about 2000. Back in the year 2000, your attention span was round about 30 to 40 seconds. You try holding your breath for 30 or 40 seconds. It's a huge amount of time. So actually, random pieces of content were getting indulged in back in 2020. However, by 2008, that 30 seconds had come down to 12 seconds. By 2015, it had come down to 8 seconds. By 2019, it had come down to 5 seconds. And they're now saying that your attention span today is round about 4 seconds, maybe just a tad under. That is a challenge for communicators, because I don't have a lot of time to play with. If I want to get to you, it's a very narrow window of opportunity. And think about this. What do you think is the attention span of a goldfish? Well, let me tell you, the attention span of a goldfish is 9 seconds long. So in theory, a goldfish has more of an attention span than you and I have. So some people get muddled up with memory, which I think is 3 seconds for a goldfish, but 9 seconds of attention span. So the bottom line is that you and I now have a reduced attention span for which a communicator has to get through. And then there's some other elements that are also challenging us. One of the other elements is, of course, that most of us get our content on a mobile device. Now, you and I can read 10,000 words on our mobile phone. Of course we can. but nobody does. Nobody reads 10,000 words on a mobile phone or on an iPad device. Why would you? It's not a comfortable read. Instead, what you and I do is scan. We're rolling down, we're scrolling, so to speak, and that's scanning for information, which means it is more important now than ever before in your career that you know the vernacular of your target audience, that you know the imagery that they're going to respond to. If you don't, with their attention spans and an uncomfortable read, they're gone. And that's going to be a challenge for all of us. And then the third challenge you face, don't forget, reduced attention span, and then where they're taking their content on, which doesn't lend itself to lots of words. The third element is that when you have your mobile phone or your mobile tablet, it's not called mobile for no reason. It's called mobile because when you're consuming content on it, the chances are you're mobile. You're on a bus, you're on a train, you're walking along the street, you're taking the dog for a walk, or you're in Starbucks waiting for your name to be called. What that means as you're scrolling is there's lots more noise coming at you. So as communicators, we have three challenges: reduced attention spans, content being consumed on devices that are not comfortable for long reads, and then you've got all this noise. That creates a massive problem for us. What's the solution to that? Well, have a look at this. This is, of course, an infographic. It tells you that, 18.1 million texts sent every 60 seconds of every minute of every hour, 4.4 million videos viewed every 60 seconds of every minute of every hour, and on it goes. 188 million emails sent every 60 seconds of every minute of every hour. That, of course, is an infographic. And infographics is the way to get your communications across, particularly if it's complex, and particularly if it's an audience that's mobile with a very short attention span. And the media know that better than anyone. That's why if you look at something like this, which is an infographic about Pinterest, when this was put together, Pinterest had 11.7 million readers on Pinterest. They stayed for an average of 98 minutes per month. Over 97% of Pinterest active people are female, and Pinterest will generate more referral traffic to your website than YouTube and LinkedIn combined. Now, I don't know how long that took me to say, probably about 45 seconds, but here's the rub. You read that particular infographic as I was plodding through the description. You read it 3 times. Why? Because you can read 60,000 times quicker than I can speak. Can you believe that? Because I'm going pretty fast. Well, it's true. And don't take my word for that. Look at the big players. This is Google, Instagram, Facebook telling us this stuff. 90% of information transmitted to your brain is visual. Eyes can process up to 36,000 visual messages per minute. Visuals themselves, as I said, processed at 60,000 times faster in the brain than text. The sense of a visual scene, the color, for example, can be felt in less than 1/10 of a second. And I don't necessarily subscribe to this figure. I think it's even bigger than that, but 40% of people are said to respond better to visual information than text. I think it's way, way higher than that. In fact, Facebook, to do a kind of experiment, they put together a timeline that was just for brands, and they found out that any brand that had a visual on it, well, of course, what it did was it got a 65% uptake in terms of what it did. So I'm a wordsmith by nature. I came into this industry because I love words, but guess what? I'm here to tell you that maybe words have kind of had their day. Maybe, just maybe, we're getting more visual. And that means that you have to be more skilled at visual. You have to be a kind of quasi-graphic designer doing your own infographics. Now, that's quite a daunting task until I tell you that the internet is your friend. It is full of the likes of Pictochart and Canva that will allow you, they're open source systems, which means they're largely free. And that will allow you to start to think about doing your own infographics. And trust me on this, if I can do an infographic, then trust me, so can you. So we are now in a kind of image-based world. And don't ever look at the big players because they don't innovate, right? Have a look at level 2 because that's where it's all happening. And if we go to level 2, we see that we are very much an image-based world. First of all, you've got the likes of Instagram up there in the billions of followers now. And then you've got the likes of Snapchat, you've got Pinterest, you've got TikTok. What is the common denominator between each one of those platforms? Well, of course, it's image, isn't it? It's all about video and image. So you can see that wherever we are in terms of demographics, we are really starting to be much more image based, and nobody gets that better than the brands themselves. And the facts on Facebook, they change all the time, but you've got nearly 3 billion people active on Facebook. But guess what? The direct number of uploads that they have on video on Facebook now exceeds that uploaded to YouTube. So Facebook actually gets more videos than YouTube, and YouTube has subtly changed. YouTube is now like a sort of community TV channel. Facebook is where you put your videos now rather than that. And the figures are daunting. 8 billion daily views on a daily basis. It's quite incredible. So what we're seeing is not just that there's this volume, it's also about shareability. Don't take too much notice of the stats, they change all the time, but a picture's worth 1,000 words. That is what you've got to start thinking. You need to be more visual in how you start to get your message across. It's a driver of change. And don't take my word, it's on every platform. Have a look at Twitter. Twitter says that if you put a visual, and that can be a video, that can be a photograph, that can be an infographic, it can be a meme, it can be a GIF, you put that on your tweet and it will get 18% more click-throughs. Now, that doesn't necessarily get me out of bed in the morning. 18%, yeah, it's okay. But when they then tell you that if you have a visual version of your tweet attached to it, you will get an 89% more likelihood of people pressing that little red heart. That is quite phenomenal. That does make me get out of bed. But get this, think about putting a video clip or a photograph or an infographic onto your tweet, and you will see a 150% increase in the chance of it being retweeted. And that is quite an incredible fact. So you can't just put any picture on there, though. You have to think about the type of picture you use. And a couple of years ago, a bunch of guys got together and studied on Pinterest what was the most popular picture to get shared on Pinterest, and then looked at why that was the case. Now, one of the secrets of being effective as a brand in digital, and it breaks the hearts of lots of my marketing director clients, is if you want to be successful in the digital world, you have to dumb down. The dumber you down, the more you get shareability. The more complex you make it, the less shareability. That is just one of those weird sort of laws of digital nature, if you like. So on that note, I'll show you what the most popular picture was on Pinterest at the time this study was done. It was Aunt Peggy's cucumber and tomato and onion salad. And why was it so popular? It had over 500,000 pins. That meant people actually took it and pinned it to their pin board. So they actually did something about it. And another 800,000 people, possibly many of the ones that were in the 500,000 pins, liked it. So if I was the marketing director of Aunt Peggy's, whoever they are, I'd expect the other directors to carry me around on their shoulders at a board meeting, hailing me as the all-powerful marketing director, because they are impressive figures. They looked at the winning characteristics. What made this picture so successful? The first thing was the color red. The color red leapt out there, and you can see it. It's in the red cherry tomatoes. It's in the Pyrex dish, which is a pink, which is a derivative of red. The doily, pink, derivative of red. So you can see there that they've got a lot of red in there, right? And that gets an action with you and I. There's no accident that red is the stop sign on traffic lights, on fire extinguishers, on exit signs. It means danger. It means sit up, take notice, be alert. And that's why it catches our eye so easily. Blue is another color that does tremendously well. The second thing they looked at was the contextual background. If you look, you can see a wooden trestle table that's laid out on. It's almost certainly been consumed outside the home, maybe on a patio or in a beer garden. You can also see the cutlery in the corner. That shows us that someone's going to eat it. The doily put out makes it look like it's been put together by someone who cares and has a bit of standards about it all. And then the lighting, which you probably can't see on this slide, shows us that this is one of those sort of summer evenings where you might be consuming this after work, for example, after you get home. And then the third big driver, and this is the big one that moves things around, inspirational. A lot of people saw that and thought, wow, that looks delicious. It looks nice and light, and I could eat that after work. And guess what? It looks like it's easy to make. I will take that and I will bookmark it for the future, because Pinterest is a social bookmarking site, and that's why it works. Another big driver that we have seen coming along is known as the importance of me. Tom Cruise was asked 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, what was the biggest change he'd seen in the film business, and everyone thought he was going to say CGI, so he doesn't have to do his own stunts. It wasn't. He said people don't collect autographs. Today, people want to be in the photo with me. It's all about me, and the really clever brands understand that. So the power of visual communications is absolutely enormous. It's absolutely the way of the future for us. And we are going to have to be much more involved in that in whatever way we can. We've got to be more visual. And you can see that I'm showing you the facts here, literally through the power of visual content, right? I'm showing you that there. So the power of visual content gets a lot of complex information across in a very short amount of time, which of course meets all those challenges that you and I are facing. And if you want to think about it, pictures, imagery, infographics, GIFs, memes, the king of them all is video. The power of video in communications, it is the dominant tool for any form of content marketing today. A Cisco report said that videos account for roughly 70% of site traffic that is consumed by either consumers or B2B buyers. And that was all through 2021. So it's a very, very effective way of getting your message across. Sorry, someone say something? Hello? Nope. Okay. I thought someone might have a question. Right. I've got to keep the pace up because I've only got a limited amount of time here. If you've got your mic on, could you just possibly switch it off just so that it doesn't disturb everybody else's hopefully enjoyment of this. So if we look at the power of video, there's a lot of things going for it. First of all, it intensifies social media presence. The minute you put a video on, it's going to get more shares, it's going to get more views, it's going to get more likes. It is going to make an impact on you. If you think about video or even infographics, but you think about this, they're very effective storytellers. And that's a great way of getting your story across in that time constraint that we have. It offers stronger user engagement because people share video, they share infographics much more so than they share text. It therefore elevates your SEO ranking because, of course, what Google is now judging you by for SEO is engagement, right? So that does that. Things that people don't necessarily think about is that video and infographics breaks the language wall. It can actually work if you're doing international work. And of course, depending on the typeface and the color and maybe the actors you're using or whatever, it can also create a very strong brand identity. And if you're in sales, if you're in retailing, marketing, B2B, what we know about video and infographics are that it generates much more referrals and it can trigger purchase as well. So it's a very, very powerful thing. So we've got to do a bit of a handbrake turn now. And let me tell you that what this is all conjuring up for us, particularly what I said early on about how people are changing in terms of authenticity and trust, who they believe and each other and all the rest of it. It means that the new third-party endorsement today is shareability. Getting your content shared is the key to success. This was at one stage the most shared photograph on Twitter. Now, I say at one stage, it was superseded by a young man asking Wendy's, the hamburger company, how many retweets he needed to get a year's supply free of charge of chicken nuggets. Wendy's came up with a crazy figure. He told Twitter, Twitter delivered. But they knocked this photograph off. But this photograph, the reason I show you it is because it is actually a PR tactic. It's a PR stunt. It was put together by Samsung Galaxy. Samsung Galaxy gave Ellen DeGeneres a contract, 7 photographs she had to take. She took them all on a Samsung Galaxy and then posted them to her Twitter account. That was retweeted. That photograph was retweeted 1.3 million times just in 3 hours. Samsung were mentioned 40,000 times across social media in 24 hours, and it all peaked at 900 mentions a minute. In fact, Twitter went down for 20 minutes during those Oscars. What that means is the power of shareability. Now, I'm just using Twitter here, but it is any form of shareability. Let me explain what I mean. So here you've got someone, let me circle it, so asking a question, conducting some research. So they're conducting some research. That's seen by 93 of their followers, of which 3 retweet it, seen by 331 there, seen by 593, seen by 381. Total set of views, 1,398. That is called amplification. What brands are doing today is they're not necessarily chasing big numbers of followers. Instead, like Ford, they're creating lots of social media accounts, getting followers based on the interest, the niche of what that account is all about. And they have seen that the shareability goes through the roof. And of course, that's what we know, right? It's all about shareability these days. Now, we are in a changing landscape. It started changing a while back. We had Meerkat, we had Periscope. They were the forerunners of what you and I would now call live streaming. And live streaming now has changed. When you've got things like Facebook Live, you cannot do an event without doing it in a live environment. Why? Because people want to live in the now. They want to be there in the now, right? So they want to share what's going on with the brand right now. So as a PR person, not only must you be doing social media, but you must be doing streaming as well, particularly if you've got a product launch or a big announcement going on, people will tune into it. And of course, we know from Facebook that they, or rather Meta, as they say now, have to change as well. They found out a little while ago that people were maybe not as involved and engaged in social media as they might have been in its early days. And what they found was that people found there was too much content to consume. So what people wanted was that niche feel, which is why people like Ford have gone down the route of lots of platforms, but smaller numbers of people. And they also describe something called zombifying content, which is where basically you're seeing content that never reacts to you. It doesn't talk to you. It doesn't engage with you in any way. And that's not a good place to be. So what that means is that Facebook changed. They went big time on groups. Groups is now the biggest growth area in the Facebook platform itself, and they're developing tribes and followings. The really smart brands going down that tribe and following group. And you might be a member of many groups. You know, I grew up in Camden, or I grew up in the 1970s or 80s or whatever it might be. Lots of people in groups, in their old school groups and everything else. And that's the big area of growth. So what we're seeing is this development of something that lots of brands are doing called tribes, where they now use social media not to sell, but to inspire people, to get loyalty. So Nando's, for example, if you go on the Nando's Facebook page and you put something insulting about Nando's, Nando's won't come on and defend themselves. No, 600,000 people that are fans of the brand will come over that hill after your backside because you've insulted their brand. And trolls will never take on a tribe. They'll take on a brand because the brand will look big and ugly and bullying if it takes on a troll. But a tribe, no, that's a different ballgame. And that's what brands are doing. Now, all of this, of course, is being driven by mobile. And that's where we've got to start thinking. Everything that you put on in terms of content must be consumed in terms of a mobile device. And all of this is being driven by lots and lots of different platforms, if you like. So what is social media for us? It's so much more than social networking. You've got blogs, which are self-publishing. You have social bookmarking sites, which can absolutely increase the volume of engagement you get on your campaign, but most brands don't use it. User-generated content like the YouTubes and the Daily Motions and the Vimeos and the Flickrs, very, very important now in terms of how we move our campaigns around. Getting people to make their own videos is important. You've got Meta, which is now moving into the virtual worlds. That's the parent company of Facebook, but Meta is a very much a big thing moving forward. You've got prosumer sites. We don't talk about consumers anymore, and that's the likes of TripAdvisor, Trustpilot, FIFO, and it goes on and on and on. Then you've got social networking, and then you've got the location-based geo social networks. All this, of course, is creating a new landscape for you. And what that means is you've got to be very wary. Things like digital ghost towns, where if you don't update your social media platforms for your client or your organization, if you don't keep them current, they start to be referred to as digital ghost towns. It means the platform has not had any life in it for a while. It looks like its facts are out of date. It's got the sort of digital equivalent of tumbleweed rolling across it. And that impacts your reputation as a brand. So if you've got digital platforms for your client, make sure that they are maintained. Now, the secret of being good at social media for any brand is simple. Be social. If you are not social as a brand, if you're not having conversations, talking to people, liking what they put and all the rest of it, then you're known as a zombie brand. Zombies, as you and I know, look like they're alive, but they're actually dead. And that is how brands are perceived if they don't get involved. You've also got phenomena on digital, like the Streisand effect. This is Barbara Streisand's house. This is the photograph that caused the Streisand effect. A photographer flying up and down the west coast of America, taking photographs of cliff sides for a project on coastal erosion. He took that photograph, put it on his website, and Barbara Streisand's lawyers came after him, threatening to sue him for invasion of privacy. They told him to take it down, and he did, but not before he put it out on social media to say that actually he'd been told to take it down. That made that photograph go viral. And that is the Streisand effect. The more you try and suppress something, the more it goes viral. So we have to be aware of all these things. Automation using TweetDeck, Buffer, Hootsuite, any of those social is a danger. Tesco's, they were discovering, News at 10 discovered that Tesco's had traces of horse meat in their beef lasagna. And at the time they broke that story, this was the tweet that Tesco put out. Now, Tesco had put that on a schedule. It had been written 6 weeks before the project had happened, but that's what had happened. Also, we have cyber security. Lots of brands get hacked. You need to know the passwords, keep it limited, keep it changing all the time. Why? Because Burger King were taken over by a hacker who pretended to be McDonald's, started diverting customers for their Whopper to the local McDonald's, then started to make announcements and started to close the stores down virtually. That took ages for the likes of Burger King to get over. And HMV, who announced the redundancy of all their staff, but they did it publicly. And one of the people in the room being told they were made redundant was the person who controlled Twitter, who was actually commenting on the redundancies at the time. So we in the outside world could see it all. So what you have to do is you have to have a digital culture. Lots of brands think that digital's this, us talking at the brand, or rather at the audience. That is not the case at all. Lots of brands think that digital is really talking about us all the time. It doesn't perform well in the digital world. Therefore, you've got to be able to talk to and relate and be social. That is the big driver. If you look at social media etiquette, you've got to be honest, you've got to be open, you've got to be transparent. You've got to use the direct messaging correctly, not to sell. You've got to post often, but not too often. If you're sponsoring posts, it's legal that you have to disclose that. You must never post a misleading link because that gets a backlash. Don't automate your posts. Don't automate shares. Don't engage in hashtag spam, and don't astroturf, which is where you pretend to generate a grassroots support for something when it's not real grass. That can easily be done by getting all your friends and colleagues to write in support of a campaign from their Gmail accounts. It's called astroturfing, and if you get caught, then the brand gets absolutely lynched. Know your audience. The barrier to entry is so low, it's easy just to walk in and get going. The trouble is, lots of brands run out of steam really early on. Know your audience, pick the right social media site to target, discover their needs, study the site, learn what you're going to do, what type of content prospers, and do that before you start the campaign. And learn, for goodness sake, the language and the value systems of your chosen social media platform. Very, very important. Also, work at it, make friends, be social, add unique value to the community, don't self-promote, learn to let go, don't get offended if people do parodies or take the mickey. This is the Wild West Web. It is not about being thin-skinned here. Make sure that the information you provide is accurate. Do not wing it. Fact checking is an industry in the social media world. be transparent, and above all, be patient. The world's biggest social media campaign was the Ice Bucket Challenge. Everyone thinks that you put something on the internet today, you get 84 million readers tomorrow morning. It doesn't work like that. The Ice Bucket Challenge took 12 weeks to get from its starting point to the general consensus of the knowledge of everybody. So we live in a conversational world. That's what digital is all about. And as brands, we must remember that. We are going into a world that was not invented for us. Social media and lots of digital platforms were not invented for brands. They were invented for people. So think about it. Now in lockdown, the use of voice search has gone through the roof. And by this time next year, around about 50% of search could be voice, which means Alexa.com, when you think about it, Alexa, Siri, Google Home, and people don't use words when they're verbally speaking the same way they do as written. Nobody reaches out in the United Kingdom, yet lots of brands write that stuff. Nobody does deep dives into stuff in the high street. You don't do a deep dive into the chickens at Tesco's, but you do deep dives into research in the corporate world. So all the brands that are really smart today, not only are their websites mobile friendly, and everyone should by now, but they also know to be speech friendly, because if I'm searching for you by speech and I'm using colloquialisms and local phrases and your website is corporatese, I'm not going to find you. And findability is the biggest challenge on the internet. So remember, conversations, they're always going to be, think of a great conversation you've had. It's going to be two-way. It's going to be relevant. The tone of voice is always going to be about equals. It's going to be a little bit of establishing of empathy early on. And it's going to be about me talking about things that are important to you. So that leads us on another break turn to content. Content is king. And what you'll see is two forms that often get muddled up: content marketing and social media marketing. Content marketing is where I get you to share my content to your followers, giving it the all-important third-party endorsement. That is content marketing. Social media marketing is where I'm weaving my message in to the communications. So I'm talking to you as a brand to a person, and I'm then weaving in the sales message. Why is content important? Because Google says so. Google has changed its algorithms consistently over years. In the old days, it used to be about link building, and that's what SEO agencies made their fortunes on. Today, it's about engagement, and content is really the bread and butter of what PR and people are all about. And it's about shareability. We need to get our content shared. So if you're thinking about the ingredients of content, it's very simple. Information is the base level, but it's not a currency a lot of us share. If I know the flights to EasyJet to Belfast, for example, going tonight, it's great information, but I'm not going to share it because you're not going to respond to it. You don't need it. If you add a bit of insight, then you start looking at it a bit more carefully. If I have an inquisitive element to it, then that, a teaser or a kind of peek preview, that really grabs your attention. Look at what the movie industry is doing for years. But if you really want to see content start to get shared and go viral, you've got to put emotion in there. Look at your own feeds on whatever platform is yours and look at the amount of emotion that's on there. It's a lot more than you might imagine. But the real ones are inspiration. If I can inspire you, then that gets shared. But all of those together, information, insight, inquisitive, emotion, and inspiration, don't add up to entertainment. Entertainment is the one that really moves it around for you. So you have to get that into your content, and then you wrap it around with a phrase that I love to use called WIFM. What's in it for me? That's the big driver. Everybody now is about WIFM. And you may have heard the phrase that knowledge is power, right? Knowledge is power. Well, not today, because today power is sharing. That's another driver in the digital world, shareability. Knowledge is power. Knowledge shared is power multiplied. What that means, of course, is that you don't have to be a great content producer to actually be an influencer in the digital world. It's one of those weird things. And this is how I'd recommend you do it. There's 4 websites to look out for: BuzzSumo, Feedly, Buffer, and Snipperly. This is how it works. BuzzSumo collects content. It's very good at identifying content that is popular, i.e. gets shared a lot. So if you put in there public relations, BuzzSumo would go off into the ether and find you all the websites that are producing content that's getting a lot of engagement around the subject of PR. It would deliver you lots of links to those websites. Now, the problem is, of course, you don't want to be going on those links all the time. So what you do, because you can't go on the website every day, is you establish an RSS, a really simple syndication link. You do that through Feedly, and then every time those websites put something new on there, you get a push alert. But of course, the push alert you get is a link, and that link can be quite long. So we then make it small. Now you can do that on Bitly, on Tiny URL, on Trim. But the one I would recommend is Snipply, because Snipply allows you to overwrite the link, because the link looks like gobbledygook. You overwrite it with a call to action. What more can you want? And then finally, you put it into a scheduled service like Buffer or TweetDeck or Hootsuite or Social or whatever, and then you push it out there. So you can very quickly be sharing great content, doing it on a scheduled basis, and you can get on with other work. But now your client or your business is going to become quite influential, right? So it's a very, very, very keen way to do it. Quickly on to content before we draw a conclusion here. And content, as I said, is the king. First up, when you are a brand on social media, you need to be active in order to attract followers and boost engagement rates. According to studies, the idea is pretty consistent. You need to post every day on Facebook, post every day on LinkedIn, 1 to 2 posts every day on Instagram, 3 to 4, maybe 5 posts on Twitter, but you can retweet those again as in case you missed the acronym there. Recommended times are to do it at peak times in the morning between 7 and 9, and then peak times across the lunch period and peak times at drive time. Why? Because that's when people mainly go onto the world of social media and digital. Remember also the kind of colors you're going to use. High lightness in a picture generates around about 24% more likes. High amount of background space, so you're not cluttering the picture, will get 29% uptick in the likes you get. Blue as well as red are dominant colors. Blue alone generates a 24% more likes. And if you've got a single dominant color, it will generate up to 17% more likes than multiple dominant colors you might have. Also, remember that most comments that come back at you as a brand are posted in the first 6 hours or so, and then it starts to really go downhill very quickly after that. So you've got to make sure that you're keeping your content as fresh as you possibly can. What type of content do you use? Well, there's lots of opportunities for brands. Stuff that works really well in my experience is things like showing behind the scenes at the brand, sneaky previews of a brand launch or news, any kind of insightful or inspirational brand pictures. Tutorials go down really, really well. And of course, you always see the trends, right? That are what's trending on any platform now. Ride those trend cycles. It's an old PR trick, but it works really well. And if you're starting out on content, the first thing you need is a bit of a niche focus. Who you're trying to target, where are you going to go, and what are you going to provide them with? It's not enough to merely have a branded presence for your company. You need a claim to fame. What can you provide your key demographics that they're not getting elsewhere? That is the big strategic question that you need to ask yourself. You also have to have a personality. Don't just post photos or post randomly. If you want to be successful, you've got to showcase a human element. So think about what is the brand's personality for the social media. And another secret, be consistent. You've got to post regularly. It increases your followings. Don't preach, tell a story instead. Very important to do that. You know, all these platforms, Instagram, for example, is awash with mediocre brand messaging that forgets the social network is supposed to be, Instagram, a visual inspiration platform. So don't preach, tell a story. Lastly, couple of few tactical things about your content that might help you here. I often get asked, why are we not getting traction on social media? And there's normally a number of reasons. First, people aren't differentiating their brand. So Try and make your brand stand out. There are thousands of brands on each platform, millions almost. So ask yourself, what is it that you're going to post that sets your brand apart from everyone else? You will need to have some kind of unique angle here. Otherwise, you'll never build that significant kind of audience. Timing is often a problem. Your timing is off, means you don't get that kind of traction. So work out where your posts perform best on each of the platforms and at what times, and get posting in that particular way. Again, a lot of people fail because they're not using the best basic photography best practices. Learn how to use all the filters that, say, Instagram gives you, or the editing tools that are available, or the framing of your shot appropriately. Work on developing a good eye for shots. Improve your skills over time, because remember, it's all about the visual today. Other people, well, your posts are just part of a news feed kind of white noise. So how are you going to make your post stand out? That's what you've got to be thinking about, not posting for the sheer sake of it. And then it's all about findability. Findability is the single biggest challenge we face. If I can't find you and you can't find me, what the heck are we going to do? We're not going to find each other. The way to get around that is the good old hashtag. I've seen people now asking me repeatedly, I don't want to do a hashtag, I want to be different. Trust me, stick with the hashtags. And what you have to do is you have to have a broad hashtags. They move fast, right? So they get us that fast response. Relevant hashtags to you, they increase engagement with you as a brand. You then refresh your hashtags in posts on a regular basis, and you keep your hashtags organized in groups. That is a way to work with them. So ask yourself this: what words do people use when searching for your brand? What words would clients use to search for your sector? Make your hashtags relatable to your brand or your sector, and maybe even create some of your own hashtags that are unique to your brand. And then use some of those open source systems like writetag.org, which will tell you how strong your hashtags are in relation to what's going on the internet. Overlay that with TagDef. TagDef is another system that helps you work out what are the best hashtags and what subjects relate well to it. They're really good. You might also want to have a look at tags for later and various other things like that. Let's finish now with just a very quick look at some future trends that are coming up. And there's a lot of stuff going to happen in 2022. Perhaps the big one started, in fact, ironically, in October of 2021, when Mark Zuckerberg announced a brand name change to Meta and his wish to shape the metaverse. And that was another part of the transformation that I was talking about earlier on. The term refers to the possibilities of a virtual and augmented reality. Some call it a virtual shared space, accessible through those VR headsets and AR glasses or even smartphone apps. Users can interact, socialize, explore, and create content in the virtual environment, and even monetize their virtual transactions. And it's going to be using blockchain technology and cryptocurrency. The metaverse is known as 3D web, and it means the internet will move from basically 2D to 3D. Very exciting stuff. Also, we're going to see more individualization. Gone are the days when customers accept a one-size-fits-all content experience. Now they want stuff that is absolutely tailored to them. That's going to be a big move in 2022 and on. Now, I've been doing blogs since the year 2010, and I always saw a blog's posts being about 400 words. They don't get printed off, so you never go more than 400 words. One of the biggest developments in lockdown was long-form content. Now you're seeing articles going from that 400, 500 word kind of limit to between 800 and 1100 words now. So we're seeing long form content coming back, particularly in the B2B world. Employee advocacy programs. Remember, people are losing trust with the usual sources of influencers. Who do we trust more than anyone? We entrust the average employee of an organization, and brands know that now. They know that to be relatable and authentic, their people should be galvanized, and you're going to see a lot more of that in 2022. Also, influencer marketing. It's been a staple of content marketing for the last few years. It's going to grow. According to data from Nielsen, which I saw recently, 92% of people trust a company that's been endorsed by other people, even if they don't know them. influencer marketing big. Data analytics and automation, they're going to be very much in the buzz in 2022. Automation tools can make a lot of our lives simpler, and it will go from helping you identify blog posts to getting higher engagement rates. You'll be automating a lot more of your content curation. It will save you a lot of effort because it will streamline your social media activities, and we're all under time pressures, of course. And of course, it's all about Meta. Augmented reality related content. That is going to be the big thing. If you thought Pokemon Go in 2019 was big, wait until this stuff takes off and we'll see it. So almost there. This is my penultimate slide. If you want to make the most of all these drivers of change, have a social presence. It's expected. Listen to the conversations about your brand. They're taking place online. Encourage engagement with your brand. Consider more visual content. Remember that with them. What's in it for me? Optimize for mobile. Optimize for speech. Embrace diversity. You've got to be on many platforms. The peso model is what it's all about now. And then seed and feed your content. So that's it. I'm almost up there. Oh, by the way, track and measure all the time. Evaluation is a management tool, not just justification. But that's it from me. Hopefully, if you want to hear more or you want to ask a question, I'll stay on for this, but at a later date, follow me on Twitter, follow me on LinkedIn. I'll always follow you back, and you can ask me anything you want at any stage. So from me, Steve, I'll sign off now, hand back to Mission Control, but I will stay around if you've got a question or two.
Great, thank you so much for that, Steve. That was really interesting. I'll just quickly wrap up. So thank you very much to everyone who's joined us this afternoon. We're going to send out the recording of this webinar and then also the slide deck to you guys early next week. If you do have any questions either for us or for Steve, just get in touch. I'm going to put the email address in the chat to you guys now. There we go. So as well as his various corporate commitments, Steve is also one of our tutors here at the Oxford Professional Education Group, teaching our CIPR courses. So that's the Chartered Institute of Public Relations. Lots of you have already expressed interest in a CIPR course with us. Some of you might already be enrolled with us as well. So if you do want to find out more about the PR courses that we offer, just get in touch and we'll be happy to help. You can also find the email address there and the link, although I'm not sure that's worked, so I might resend that. But other than that, I think that's everything for today. And we look forward to hopefully hearing from some of you guys soon later on about the courses that we offer. So thank you very much for joining, and we hope you guys all have a lovely day and a nice weekend when it finally comes. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.